Welcome back to our exciting conversation about how the Bible keeps us bound. Not to waste any more time, we can welcome Dr. G into the conversation.
Hello.
Turn it back over to the Reverend Dr. Dominique A. Robinson, the leader through How Does the Bible Keep Us Bound? Thinking about questions of gender.
Mighty Lamb. Welcome back to episode 2. And for those of you who are subscribers and listeners, you already know that we did a whole catch-up episode. So y'all are now seeing a mama on the line. We have celebrated that the Kemps have become parents. And so we certainly want to say, hey, girl, hey, mama, hey. Jumping back into the line, we're grateful to have Pastor Haddon with us as well as we jump into this question of how does bad Bible keep us bound? And we have already talked to you all about the Bible itself doesn't keep you bound. The people who use it, bind you, and you allow them to. My grandmother used to say, now I ain't got no heaven or hell to put you in, but I can lead you to hell if you let me. You see what I'm saying? And that's really the gist underneath that. Before we jump into this kind of heavy conversation, y'all already know how this goes. We already covered the cereal situation. We won't go back. We already know how Dr. G handles cereal. It is not cereal. It is parfait. It's a wonderful way that she brings together several as Dr. Joel Kemp says, sophisticated palate items together to make a dessert for breakfast is what it sounds like. But before we go into that, we've covered cereal. Let's jump into this. Games. We have heard, Dr. G, that now that you all are parents, you have already introduced your oldest son to spades.
You know.
At 12 years
all
old.
About education and elite education, and it begins with spades.
You all have already started. Your 12-year-old has been introduced lovingly into the game of spades. And you all have already, listeners, you've had experiences knowing that both Dr. J and Dr. G have sophisticated ways of talking trash. So I'm pretty sure that both of their boys will also develop that skill set. But Pastor Haddon has joined the line. So we got to ask Pastor Haddon this question. Pastor Haddon. We understand the people have told me grown people play BitWiz. Okay. I don't know how to play BitWiz. I'm not even going to admit that I'm grown yet. I'm 40 and I'll start learning. I've already admitted that I can't play dominoes because I need a calculator to count the little dots to figure out if I'm winning or losing. But here's the question for those of us who are starting way back for Uno. For Uno, do you, when you're playing, do you stack? Because I've been told it is inappropriate to say run a train. That's what the people of God taught me when they said, don't say run a train.
I get it. I understand. Yep.
Yeah, right. You listen, culturally, I know it's probably y'all would understand about, we run a train, you know, all the things. Okay, but do you stack?
I think stacks is the better term.
Right. Do you stack sequentially? Do you do like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? Do you stack, or do you do 2 draw 4s, 2 reverses? Do you stack?
I didn't stack. That wasn't how I did it. I didn't stack.
Okay. But where are you born and raised?
Born and raised Detroit, Michigan.
Okay. Cleveland, Ohio. We didn't stack.
Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We didn't stack.
Yeah.
Okay, good old Newark, New Jersey, New York, New Jersey. You know, I don't want to go into Philadelphia, Baltimore. I don't know if they stack, but by the time I got to college, we were still stacking. Nowadays, it's dangerous. You know, you put 4 draw 4s on top of me, I'm probably gonna swing across the table as badly as you talking trash over spades. All right, so we've covered our game, and these days these children are playing video games. They're not even playing card games. Like, Lord have mercy, help the babies learn how to play Scrabble, Monopoly, the family game that goes on forever and ever. Like, hello, you're supposed to learn. That's what. All right, we jumping into this conversation, beloveds. Y'all have been watching, you've been tuning in, and we've been talking about how does the bad Bible bind us or keep us bound. And we've covered race as best we can, right? These are topics that we will never, ever, ever fully cover. We are now on gender. We are on gender. I think I want to start with first asking for clarity around, and maybe this is Dr. G, you help us. People are conflating gender, sex, and sexuality all in one. How should we separate the definitions?
And so let me caveat to say there's entire specialties in psychology about this. And so not all psychologists do all the same things.
Yes.
My specialty areas are definitely in child anxiety.
Yes.
And so that all that said, part of providing culturally competent care requires all psychologists to be aware of and not overlap distinctions when there are differences. But you are right, the terms get conflated routinely just in popular language, in politics, everywhere. But if we're talking about gender identity versus sex assigned at birth, we're talking about kind of we're really thinking nowadays about a social construct and in terms of that gender identity. I think that's something more and more. And when we talk about race, we think about it as a social construct. And so routinely we're thinking about what are these socially constructed identifiers that are important for us to understand and recognize, and that has something to say about one's lived experience, and then also about the historical nature of oppression that comes with that identifier. And so that's why it's important to think about and to recognize and to name and those specific identities in order to be able to see what is that historical legacy of oppression. Because if we don't acknowledge that, then we erase something that impacts someone's day-to-day life now. And also we're not able to look for remedies. And I think that's one of the major political fights now, which is if we erase all these identities, if we sort of expand what was once kind of a colorblind in the context of with race, but now in terms of talk about the identity politics, I think the desire is, okay, if we just erase all identities, then we don't have to face any historical atrocities and oppressions. Then we have no responsibility or accountability or no cost to ourselves. We can just move forward as is.
Wow. Thank
so
you.
That was a mouthful.
No, and we needed it for this conversation, right? We wanted to give people, I don't want to say guardrails, but at least for them to know where our parameters are. With that, I'm jumping to Dr. J. Dr. J, is there a distinction between sex and gender in biblical language?
If one thinks about it as that social construct, then what one can argue is that the Bible does not have gender roles in the same way that gets defined in 20th and 21st century American context. But it does have clear differentiations regarding biological sex.
Okay.
So
I simply wanted those to frame our conversation as people are listening when we are speaking about, because Pastor Haddon and I know we're going to jump in and we starting at Eve, beloveds. So we talking about Eve. I would hope that, or not hope, I'm wondering, is it a safe assumption we are assuming a sex assigned at birth as female, and then the lived experience that we are finding from our perspective reading into the Bible around, like you said, gender norms and gender structures and the social construct, the same way we've been kind of doing with race, seeing ourselves as Black Americans as coming out of Egypt, right? So I just wanted to at least name it and know that these are things we're still wrestling with, right? It's still, and maybe not wrestling, maybe that's the wrong language, but still nuancing and figuring out and learning, rooted in love and respect, which is why it is always helpful for us to ask persons to identify themselves and share with us and on all the things. So with that being said, from the very first, opening passages of the Bible, the people of God have determined, practiced, articulated, and preached that women were not equal to men. And Dr. Kemp, before Pastor Haddon and I jump in on how we feel about this as women as scholars, will you help the people of God understand this creation of Adam and Eve and whether there's equality and or equity in that?
Yeah, certainly. So one of the things, this is one of conversations Dominique and I have had both in this format and in others, is the importance of studying context, as we talked about in our first part of our conversation, allows us to recognize when we have bad Bible. So when one talks about the creation story in Genesis 2, where the man is knocked out, falls asleep, and from his rib is formed a woman. First of all, it may not be a rib. It's another bone that we'll talk about when folk are grown.
Oh, mighty God, I can't wait for that episode, beloveds. Y'all make sure as y'all in the chat, y'all streaming. You remember, you got to ask us about sinners, and you got to ask us about this bone, if it's a bone. Huh?
Right. When God takes this bone from Adam, and forms Chava, which is where we get the name Eve. The Bible says, and God made her to be an Ezer, a help meet. The word Ezer in Hebrew is also a word that gets used to describe God and God's relationship to Israel. God is the one who is the Ozer for Israel, the one who helps, who aids the nation. So if the first woman has a description that matches the description of God's very function for the nation of Israel, but I'm not a womanist. I would not be allowed in the club, but they let me sit at the table every now and again. I would argue that at the bare minimum, there is a deep value for a treasuring of acknowledging the importance of and the assertion of a woman's value that's not subservient to men, but is at the very least equal to men. And the fact that she functions in the way that God functions. And for me, no greater measure of equality can be granted to anyone than to say you function as God functions.
Jesus.
But, I'm just a Hebrew Bible guy.
Come on now. Listen. Now, Pastor Haddon, correct me if I'm wrong, as you know, that's the space that we do here. You are co-pastor, correct?
Yes.
Okay. You're co-pastor, Breathe Church, and you're co-pastor with your spouse, correct?
Yes.
Your spouse who identifies and is a man, correct?
Correct.
All right. Talk to us. Listen, I'm just trying to set the conversation for the listeners, okay? Also, they're gonna be acting up in the chat now, in light of all this clarification. But co-pastor, or pastor, period. Because when I go to the website, it doesn't say co-pastor, it's the pastors, period.
Yes.
So pastor, I'm talking to you, and then I got two married people on this line here who do ministry together. And I just from watching your ministry and certainly being in a relationship with the Kemps, never have I ever seen either of you as women be treated as, spoken to, as if you were less than. As a matter of fact, I have seen a hell of a lot, and I do mean hell of a lot, people of God, of deference from both of your husbands in honoring the gifts that you all have and leading. And so talk to us about how that has been as a pastor, co-pastor, for the people of God out there trying to figure out that term. Have your people been resistant to it? How was that received from maybe your village or community as you were moving into your ministry?
I feel like I'm very fortunate. The people around me, my village, my husband, oh my God, have just been very receptive to what I believe God has called me to do. And even as I'm choosing to grow and learn and become a better me in that call, everybody's been very receptive. Now, there have been people that have called my husband, not necessarily church members, but people that may know us, have called and been like, yeah, I can't come because, women aren't supposed to be preaching and X, Y, and Z. And my husband is very much like, okay, cool. Like, well, hope you find somewhere you can be that, you get what you need from God. I understand why you can't be at our church. And it has not been a challenge for me. And I thank God for that. One thing I have found, though, that I really didn't know in this space, that many times you see pastors and their wives, and you see the label of co-pastor. And what I've come to find out is that has been in promoting the ministry only. And when you really start looking and digging, and it's like, oh no, she doesn't get to say anything. She doesn't have a say so. She may stand up at the end of service with me or whatever, but her voice is not, and I was very surprised because you see it promoted very much like this couple in ministry, but it is not uncommon for many men to be challenged with their wives being in ministry in that aspect. But for me, I'm blessed. I've been lucky.
Praise baby Jesus. Well, we're talking about how bad Bible can keep us bound. And we started with the very kind of, first example, the passage of the way people have interpreted whether or not Eve was created second, what that means or looks like. And now we're going to dig a little bit deeper. The people of God blame her for having this conversation with the serpent and bringing mankind down. And so in some ways, there's the bad interpretation that has led to some further bad particular things, which brings us to the system of patriarchy, right, or gender biases. So Dr. G, how do you help those of us who are listening and engaging? How do we overcome any? I know that's a hard question. Like it's very generalized, but
No.
you know what? Let me say it the way I really want to say it. As
Go
a
ahead.
woman in ministry, my hardest problems have been with women and not necessarily men. And I'm clear that patriarchy is a system and not a gender. So then in essence, I guess I'm asking, how do you help the sisters who have internalized this way, who prevent someone like myself and Pastor Haddon from functioning in our anointing? How do you help them overcome that internalized patriarchy?
Right. Yeah. I think my mind has gone in several directions as we talk. So do you mind? I'm going to start with kind of one of the first things that was coming to mind, just even going back to talking about, we talk about the man and the woman being created. And so we're kind of analyzing that text from a modern, and as much as we don't like to admit it, Eurocentric, individualistic, separatist framework. Right. Even though we come out of a people that would have been more collectivist, we've been in a Eurocentric, individualistic, where separation is more the norm, me versus you, as opposed to we. We're not coming out of a I am because we are type of a framework, right? And so first and foremost, I think we don't have unity. And so that's why it's so easy to be me versus you, just as individually. Broadly, we're also very primed for group level identity and group level competition with one another and then within groups. And so then we start to see, even within groups, identifying, okay, you're my competition. And so I think it's that internalization, but then also within, when there is an oppressed identity or identifier, then that can create what's called a scarcity mindset. And a scarcity mindset means that we're viewing that we only have access to limited resources. And then who we fight for those resources for is those who are most proximal to us. And so we fight internally first because we are thinking this is scarce. So it's kept from me, therefore you got a small piece, and so you must have gotten my piece. Or why should you have that? That's different than what I have. And so we can become fierce with those kind of closest to us, more proximal to us. And so part of that internalization is, one, recognizing that it's happening. It's always the first step, is awareness. Second step is then leaning against that and saying, okay, I'm feeling this emotion of competition. I'm feeling like I need to compete, but is that really true? Can I just be accepting of myself and my giftings, and someone else's giftings are not a challenge to mine? They're not a threat to me. But I think all of those are in the messages that we get, is that someone else's giftings and strengths might allow them opportunities that should have been mine. And you can hear that everywhere, right? That's the message we get all the time, everywhere. This should be mine. Come get it.
Right. Dr. Kim, Dr. J. Kim, I'm getting ready to come to you about something, because what Dr. G just brought up, which I'm pretty sure Pastor Haddon can say she's experienced as well. We get women who basically, in essence, feel like they can't receive from us because they have identified the male pastor as their covering, which to me has been misinterpreted as a romantic relationship, which is, it's like, I can't be your pastor or preach to you because you have interpreted the word covering and or pastor as a romantic relationship. Like you said, you got a piece, right? So you can't receive from me, because then now we're going into sexuality. You can't receive whatever you got a mindset around sexuality and relationships, or misinterpretation of pastoring and or covering. And then it's interesting that they have internalized being the lesser person. Therefore, I don't want to receive from the lesser person. I need the quote unquote total real person that God has ordained to be head of the household, which ain't in Genesis yet. So Dr. Kemp, with that, what do we say about Eve talking to the serpent and God coming out and finding them naked and ashamed?
Yeah, I think one of the nice things we can say about that, and goes back to our first conversation about no one knows everything and getting that community, is there are a lot of different ways that Eve's story has been understood. Our Jewish brothers and sisters have a long interpretive tradition. The ancient Near East, so that Afro-Asiatic world out of which the Hebrew Bible emerges, have similar stories. And one of the things that's fascinating about some of those stories is in those stories, the woman is the hero. The woman is the more mature one. So the woman is not the duped fool who leads all of humanity astray. If she is punished, it's because she should have known better. So there's almost this sense of you get greater responsibility because you had greater knowledge, which is radically different than how many, as Dr. G was saying, in a Western individualistic framework understand it. The second thing is we often assume in that story Eve was by herself. If I can be ignorant for just 4 seconds, dying in the text, right? Get hooked on phonics for just one moment. So one of the questions becomes, using the kind of language of covering with all of its problems, which could be an episode in and of itself. But if Adam was meant to be the covering for Eve, and Eve is now having a conversation with the serpent, and Adam is absent, then Adam, you literally fell asleep on the job. So is the indictment already against Adam that if this woman is having this conversation, he is not there, then has he already failed in his duties to cover her?
Jesus.
And one of my favorite Eastern Orthodox ministers, and I'll stop here, when he talks about the first versus the second Adam, he talks about the contrast. When God came to confront sin, Adam was like, the woman you gave me, she did it.
My God.
When the second Adam comes, he stands between God and his woman, the church, and says, Lord, pour your wrath on me, save her. And says that for men, we need to be like the second Adam to cover our women, to take God's wrath to save the women behind us. That's what it means to be a man. So.
Beloved, while you're watching, we already telling you how you can sow into this ministry financially, because you preachers are about to take this and run with the closes of your sermon. You're welcome. Pastor Haddon, I know you've had the experience where you had to redeem the bad girls of the Bible. So talk to us a bit about in ministry, in praxis, as a pastor, as a preacher, as a pastoral care, person, all the things you're doing in that local church context. Dare I say, and also in the gospel industry, the redemption of these women, or the identifying demonization of women. Girl, tell us how you do it, how you redeem us.
First of all, I'm about to run. I'm about to scream, because listen, the basics of what Dr. Kemp was saying, we are taught from Sunday school age that Eve was just traipsing off by herself. And if she had been in her place, none of this ever would have happened. But the Bible clearly says she turned to her husband that was with her, right? We just missed it. Do we even read? Like, do we even bother to read, right? And so, oh my God, that took me somewhere else. But I'm in this newfound place where I'm not gonna come for you, but if I'm in the vicinity and you're trying to come for us, I'm definitely going to clarify, right? So in the context of church, and even in the gospel music industry, there's a few scriptures people like to quote. They like to quote the one, like, it's better to be on the corner of a rooftop than in the house with, all this kind of stuff that makes women look like the problem. And so I casually have just conversations. One of my favorite ones is to talk about the woman that was caught in adultery. We always talk about that, and how she is perceived and taught as if she's just this whore, right? And I'm like, if we look culturally, first of all, women could not seek divorces. So it's not like she just divorced husband after husband, and adultery was punishable by death. So I doubt that she's a serial adulterer, right? And so I'm like, you look at this woman, 9 times out of 10, she's gone through some stuff. She's either been abandoned, she's buried multiple husbands. Either way it goes, Jesus sees her in a way that the church does not. And I think that's how the church views many women. We're just kind of there to support. We're kind of there to help. It's like be seen and not heard. And I'm going to, like I said, I'm not going to come for you, but I'm going to challenge it if it washes up on my beach. And I have been, it's been said to me like, okay, Tammi, we want to use you. We're thinking about using you for X, Y, and Z. So just be careful about being too feminist or too womanist. You want to be careful. Speak up for the man sometimes. And my response is like, yeah, you're probably going to have a problem with me then, because I believe I'm called to this. I like Dr. Kemp said, I don't know it all. Right? But I'm trying to learn enough to make sure that I can speak for maybe a woman that does not have the language, but is dealing with being pressed in on to not be able to say anything. And then I'm going to say this. I've always found it fascinating. I haven't really dug into it. I just found it fascinating how that in the Genesis account, God is creating all of these things. He's creating all of these things and everything is good. You know, he did this and it's good. And he did that and it's good. It's all good. And then all of a sudden, whatever man's got going on, whatever's happening in this garden, God is looking at it like, now that he's alone and that's not good. Like whatever he's got going on, that ain't good. Let me get somebody in here that can help him. Always found that fascinating, and I just think women not, we're not forced, but it's kind of impressed upon us to take this idea that this negative viewpoint that we're just kind of the help in a negative connotation. And so I'm asking God to help me be able to battle that agenda.
Now I'm about to go somewhere because I got the people on the line for it. We we're at the top of July. We're having this conversation. So Black community, we just saw the BET Awards. I'm going somewhere. Y'all stay on the line. Stay tuned here. Stay connected. We just watched the BET Awards. We watched where Kevin Hart was the host. He made some jokes. Nobody was left off the table, or maybe they were, and we don't know, right? There were some jokes made about Kirk Franklin, front twerking, beloved, because apparently twerking only belongs to the back, and apparently with females only, apparently. But anyway, he talks about him front twerking. For those who watch, you know what else he said about it, right? And in that, there were some jokes that were made around Kirk Franklin, right? And there was a celebration towards him. He was considered one of the icons. In that same show, we watched Glorilla, who is not a gospel artist, but who had done what is it called what is it called, Pastor Haddon, when you feature on the other person, when you got somebody else come on?
Well, she just did a feature, or it was like a crossover. Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay. But mind y'all, beloveds, I want to be real clear. It was her album. It was her album, where I think it was Kirk Franklin, Maverick City, Kiera Shear, right? They're on her album. If you actually really listen to it, because hello, she actually is praying on the album. It actually is a prayer. All right. She wins the Bobby Jones Gospel Award. No tea, no shade. This is the same Bobby Jones where just last year in the same episode, Sexy Red was next to him saying some things that he had to lean over. We called it. He leaned over and asked, is she talking about her genitalia? And the answer was yes, right? So I just want to be real clear about this contrast of Bobby Jones gospel music. And there is a rhetoric that people are upset, annoyed that Glorilla received this award. And I wrestle with, why are we upset with this when previous persons who were men also did crossovers and were celebrated? And I the first person I'm thinking of is R. Kelly. Charlie Wilson has been on piece. Like, there have been other men involved. And quite frankly, when Nicki Minaj did it with Tasha Cobbs, nobody got upset about that. You had Salt decide to leave Pepper and join Revolution. So I wonder if the demonization of being hypersexualized played a role in why people are upset that Glorilla won the award.
I think that absolutely plays a role. But I think what's actually happening, I'm almost positive that's what's actually happening with the gospel community, is like what you stated when Nicki Minaj did the feature with Tasha Cobb, and when other secular artists have done features with other gospel artists. But this time, Glorilla was the actual artist. And see, what gospel music did I may get in trouble for this. I don't mind.
Come on, we troublemakers.
What gospel music did is we wanted the platform so bad. We wanted the proximity to success, money, fame so badly that we opened the door, right? Mm-hmm. Well, once you open the door, you don't get to say who comes in and how they come in, right? And so we wanted to do all of these collaborations with R&B and secular artists because then it put us in a place due to the proximity, right? Our names are being said alongside. We get the awards, we get the red carpets, we get all of these things. And then now that the door has been open, you can't say who decides they're going to do a gospel record or not. And I do believe that had it been a male, had it been a Tank, had it been a Jamie Foxx, had it been a Tyrese, it would not be as problematic. I think that even if Glorilla, knowing that she was nominated for that award, had even shown up looking churchy, talking different, but she remained her authentic self throughout the entire process, I think that was problematic as well. Now, as gospel music being a predominantly Black genre, mm-hmm. we will invite anybody to the table. You do not see Christian music doing that. You do not, and you even see what the Grammys just did with the country category, because Beyonce just kicked the door down. So now guess what? Because we're not going to let these white young men and women miss out on their accolades. So we're going to add a traditional country category because they're still going to get what they're going to get. But as Black gospel artists that just want to play, want to be involved, the devil came to the door and said, invite me in. And we said, come on in. And now this is what we're getting. And we think we can control it, or we should want to control it, especially when they aren't showing up the way we want them to. And yeah, we got a problem with that. But I think it's foul. I think it is what it is.
Jesus. So thank you very much. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. Because, again, coming out of the tradition you've come out and the work that you've done is certainly, listen, your expertise and scholarship matter in that perspective as well. And that's also a reminder to both of the Dr. Kemps, we've got to watch Sinners, because all of that is in Sinners. So we are getting ready to wrap this up a bit. And I just want to ask the three of you all to share, what resources would you offer people who are working through overcoming gender biases? Or even Dr. G, what do we read to learn the distinctions between sex assigned and gender and sexuality? How do we better understand for our own knowledge? So what resources would you all offer to the people of God who are tuning in, watching, and listening? And actually, I'm going to ask Dr. J to go last so that he can go ahead and wrap up our episode.
I'll start. There's an amazing book I'm reading now, and I've been sharing it with some other leaders. It's called Leading a Church in a Time of Sexual Questioning by Bruce Miller. And it's an amazing book. And I've been talking to other spiritual leaders and pastors and senior pastors and leaders, because the people that serve under us speak our language, right? And if we are unsure about what this looks like, and we're all over the place about what this looks like, we're going to breed lead teams that don't know how to deal with these questions and these kinds of people. And then one thing I tell people to do when it comes to gender and sexuality and sexual questioning, we cannot address it as the church without being honest about our own personal biases and our own personal icks. Because the truth of the matter is we are bringing little Bible to this conversation and more of our own personal likes and dislikes. And that's what makes the church seem harsh and ineffective in ministering to and pastoring people that fall into the community, or people that are having gender questioning issues and things like that.
Okay, there we go. One thing that comes to mind, actually, and I can share some additional resources, but one of the first things that came to mind actually was a book that my lab looked at this past Black History Month. So I run the Resist Lab at Mercer University College of Health Professions, which is resistance for intergenerational stress and trauma. And what we did from a feminist perspective, womanist perspective, is we examined and read the book Take My Hand by Dolan Perkins Valdez. And we had a wonderful discussion about the historical legacy of racialized violence against Black women. And so it's not an easy read, but what it does is it looks at some of the history of sterilization. It's based off of true historical events. And you see themes of, certainly you see themes of gender role, gender identity, expectations from a historical perspective that you can trace into modern day life, concepts of family planning. You also see agency, questions of agency. And then you see questions of class represented in there as well within the Black community. And I think it's a thought-provoking read that generated lots of discussion. It's actually freely available. There's a PDF of it that it looks like, I think it's a legit PDF. I hope it's well, I'll just say that. It's I don't want to promote this PDF if it's not a legit PDF, but my RAs, my research assistants, were able to find a PDF of it. And so that might be the graduate student hack when there aren't funds. So let me just mention the name of the book, Take My Hand. And I can share some additional resources. We read some journal articles in support of it, to support the themes that were in there as well.
All right. Thank you so much, Pastor Haddon. Thank you so much, Dr. G. Dr. J, the mastermind behind Masterclass Moments. Take us on out of here with some resources. Yes.
So there are three scholars that came to mind that are sort of foundational for how Hebrew Bible thinks about gender. There are, again, many more, but no. So it's not sort of a bibliography that's half the length of the episode. The first we invoked in our first conversation, Phyllis Triple, that her work is still often alluded to today. The second is Dr. Juanita Weems. Her work is, again, foundational, particularly for kind of womanist biblical hermeneutics and scholarship. And then the third is Dr. Will Gaffney. Those are three individuals that you will often hear their names invoked. So Phyllis Triple, Juanita Weems, and Will Gaffney are the three that, if you're trying to get a sense of where the field is, those are three people to start the conversation with. Then others like Gail Yee and others can be added. But I would say start with those three, and that'll help get you thinking about not only how scholars have thought about women, but also kind of unearthing the women who are in the Bible. I think Pastor Haddon, you were talking about kind of having to redeem the bad girls of the Bible. One of the other challenges is also to unearth all of the women who are in the Bible who are often silenced or skirted over in traditional sermons, and the images of God that suggest God has a feminine dimension, or at least an aspect to that gets lost. And so I think those scholars are useful in us thinking about that and using the Bible in the work that we do within churches, communities, etc. So those are three things that have come to mind for me in response to your question, Dominique. I'll do the Baptist. Well, beloved, we have come to the end of our time. Again, I want to thank Pastor Haddon. And if you didn't remember, she is a Grammy Award-winning songwriter. So when she talks about the industry, she is an expert within it. So she has the credentials to talk about what she's talking about. So I want to thank Pastor Haddon. Thank, obviously, Dominique for her work as host, and obviously the greater Dr. Kemp, aka Dr. G, for joining us for this part of the conversation. And again, we are not yet done. We have one more exciting part to go, but we'll put a pause in it for now. We'll come back to look at how does the Bible keep us bound regarding questions of mental health. We thank you as always for taking time to be with us in the JL family. We'll see you in our next conversation on how does bad Bible keep us bound. God bless and see you soon.
The Hebrew Hotline is a dynamic resource that provides insightful and inspirational engagement of biblical Hebrew to Christian leaders, seminarians, and laity. The Hotline will assist you in providing an in-depth exegesis, contemporary hermeneutical transfer, and practical application for your sermons, Bible studies, presentations, and lectures. Visit our website and schedule your Hebrew Hotline session today.